What's a strange but true human fact about the body? Story 1. If you were to stretch out the entire surface area of your lungs, they would cover a tennis court. I found this out because I was searching Google for the typical size of a tennis court, and one of their suggestion searches was something like, "Are your lungs as big as a tennis court?" And I was extremely confused for a moment. Story 2. There's a cool way to ease the pain of headaches immediately. If the pain is on the left side of your head, you will need to pinch hard between the thumb and pointer finger of your right hand, and the other way around. Only real problems with this is that it kinda hurts your hand, and once you stop doing it, the pain of the headache comes back. Also, don't do this if you're pregnant because it can induce labor. Story 3. You can determine the sex of a skeleton by looking at the pelvis and seeing if the pelvis looks like a Mickey Mouse head, female, or a reindeer head, male. It's funny because it works surprisingly well in some cases. It doesn't always work 100% for prepubescent skeletons and pelvises that have in-between markers, but it's still a fun trick. Story 4. The laryngeal nerve that starts in your brain and goes down into your larynx and controls what the larynx does, breathing, swallowing, voice box, etc., so you'd think it's about 5 to 6 inches long. Instead, the nerve travels down your back, past your shoulders, wraps around an artery close to your heart, then travels back up to your larynx, adding an extra 15 to 20 inches of unnecessary length. This same nerve is also present in giraffes, and also loops around the giraffe's heart as shown in the giraffe dissection video. This 2-meter long, doubled up nerve's start and end points are hands width apart, often used as an example against intelligent design. Evolution gradually changed the other dimensions, and the nerve never mutated another route, so giraffes are essentially mute. Story 5. All hairs, because of the different skin texture and hair follicle growths through, are actually pretty close to impossible to pluck or pull out and must be shaved. This is 100% real. Give it a try if you doubt it. You'll be amazed. Story 6. Your body has enough energy to lift a really heavy car, but your brain manages and decreases your body's capabilities. Because if you did lift a car, all your blood vessels would explode. IIRC, also your bones would be crushed. The human muscle structure is vastly overpowered and then run at low capacity the entire time as part of what gives us our incredible stamina. Our long muscle fibers actually make us one of the strongest mammal on Earth by weight, but they're really not set up to be used that way, and even in short bursts of full use would tend to lead to tearing. Story 7. Our eyes are super cool. You would think that all of the blood vessels going into the eye would be behind the photoreceptors, right? So that the blood vessels don't interfere with the light we're seeing. Well, it turns out that's not the case. That's why we have a blind spot. It's where the blood vessels enter through the back of the eye, and then they spread out around the inside of the eye. So there's a whole bunch of blood vessels in the insides of our eyeballs, and that means that as light enters the eye through the pupil, a shadow of the blood vessels gets cast onto the photoreceptors in the back of the eye. Normally, our brain does a great job of photoshopping these out, but under the other conditions, it's actually possible to see those blood vessels. But it gets even weirder. The blood vessels in the eye are so incredibly tiny that blood actually flows through them in a single file line, one blood cell at a time. The plasma and the red blood cells, which make up the vast majority of blood, pass by completely invisible. But the other 1% of our blood, the white blood cells, can on rare occasions actually be seen. Once again, it requires pretty specific circumstances, most importantly a uniform field of blue light. And it just so happens that a sky on a clear day is the perfect shade of blue to see the blue field entoptic phenomenon. Story 8. There is a stage in early embryonic development where you are only an anus, essentially. No other opening or digestive tract. That comes much later. A little circular-ish cellular thing that absorbs nutrients and makes waste, and, hopefully, grows into a person that does more than that in its life. Story 9. The amount of Planck lengths that go across a human brain is equal to the amount of human brains that would go across the universe. So human brains are literally in the middle of relative size from the smallest to the largest things we know. Story 10. Human hair can record what you have eaten based off chemical composition. It can also determine regional aspects of what you eat, such as the food culture relative to the area of residence and how high said person is on the food chain. Americans have more carbon in their hair because they eat more corn. Story 11. Your pancreas attracts every other pancreas in the universe with a force proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the distance between them. People mistake the theory of gravity to mean things falling to Earth, when really it means every pancreas in the universe is attracting every other pancreas in the universe with a force proportional to the product of their masses and inversely proportional to the distance between them. Story 12. There is an apron of fat over the organs in the abdomen called the omentum, technically two, the greater and lesser. It helps protect them, but also works in immune regulation. In cases of abdominal injury, infection, or cancer, it can collect and wrap itself around that area. Story 13. We experience things as they were in the past. It takes time for your body to receive a signal, convert it to a chemical response, send the signal to the brain, and for the brain to process it into something recognizable. The most real-time sense is sound, since it's primarily mechanical processes. Story 14. Well, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but I heard that when babies are growing in the womb, the Y gene activates at a certain point and a boy starts to grow. What would have been ovaries grows into testicles. What would have been a clitoris grows to be a penis. Yes, that's basically what sexual differentiation is. An early embryo is like a blank canvas. Depending on whether you have an X or a Y chromosome, it will differentiate as female or male. The penis and clitoris come from the same proto-organ, same as the labia and the scrotum or the ovary and the testy. Certain embryonic organs atrophy in males and continue developing in females, or vice versa. For example, the uterus comes from the Mullerian duct, whereas in males that duct just becomes a tiny hole in the prostate. Story 15. Tons of different tissues and organs can secrete hormones. I always thought only organs designed to secrete hormones, endo/exocrine, can release them. But many organs and tissues can. For example, if your heart stretches too much due to high blood pressure, the cells will actually secrete a hormones telling your kidneys to get rid of sodium to lower blood pressure. Story 16. Our blood is fairly corrosive. Think aliens. Our stomach acid has been hammered here. One thing most people ignore, our bodies are composed primarily of the strongest solvent known to man, water. We bathe in it, wash our clothes in it, etc. Consider it as moderately close to A being composed 80% of sulfuric acid. We can survive in a wide range of biomes and temperatures, which very well might shock aliens. 110 degrees and sub-zero degrees without issue. We can be stabbed, shot, break limbs, etc., and keep on rolling. In fact, humans have a high chance to survive damn near anything if it's not an immediately fatal injury. We can survive on minimal modifications, pure vegetarian or meat-based diet, on raw or processed foodstuffs. We eat for fun, poison, and capsaicin. Our sleep/wake cycles are driven by sunlight. When deprived of that stimulation, we can adapt our schedules with high flexibility to current norms, going so far as to require manual simulation in all-night and all-day scenarios near the poles which we live in. The human brain is a frightening thing, capable of self-healing from a wide variety of issues, including losing half the entire thing. Story 17. Your intestines squish and move all around throughout the abdominal cavity rather than staying in one spot like the models we study in school. Also, the female body literally builds a coat to shed and cause bleeding if a sperm doesn't fertilize the egg it releases. Story 18. When your cerebral cortex is blown out, pulling the trigger on a shotgun you were tickling the roof of your mouth with is one way to do it, you will shit your pants as you limply drop to the ground with a meaty flop. Story 19. I had a heart attack 8 years ago. They installed 2 stents in 2 arteries that supply blood to my heart. Had another one this past Christmas Eve. They went in to install new stents. They found that the original ones I got 8 years ago were blocked. They couldn't get them out or reinflate them. They also discovered that my heart grew a new vein, trying to get blood from the back of my heart to the front. It can just not deliver enough blood. At 60 years old, my body was trying to repair itself. I'm living like this now, with blood thinners. Story 20. Your collarbone is designed to break in the middle rather than at the endpoints. This is actually super important because where the clavicle connects to the sternum, you have major blood vessels running behind it with your esophagus and trachea. It would be pretty horrible if it broke right there. It's possible to dislocate it from the sternal joint, however, it's insanely hard to do and only happens in cases of severe blunt force trauma. Story 21. In order to get rid of the alcohol, your body first transforms it into an even more poisonous substance called ethanol. The substance can be broken down and disposed. It's hypothesized that people who get sick from small amounts of alcohol do so because they have an issue with one of the enzymes in this pathway. Either the enzyme converting ethanol to ethanol works too fast, or the enzyme breaking down the ethanol works too slow, leading to a buildup of the intermediate product. Story 22. I have 3 weird facts. Everyone has a unique smell, except for identical twins who smell the same. The human heart creates enough pressure to squirt blood 30 feet in the air. Humans are the only animals to produce emotional tears. The human feet have 52 bones, accounting for 1/4 of all the human body's bones. Now have a good day. Story 23. If you take an average adult male's blood vessels and put them all to form a single like, even the microscopically small ones, you'd have a good line that goes around the Earth's equator twice. Or was it 3 times? I know it's a total of 100,000 miles. That also means that you'd only need roughly 4 or 5 such adult males' blood vessels to reach the moon. Story 24. Some pimples smell like blue cheese. Here's why. The white stuff that comes out is actually a combination of sebum of dead white blood cells, along with dead bacteria and toxins. That is what makes it smell bad. Story 25. The human body cannot digest fiber. Soluble fiber is fermented by your colon's microbacteria and absorbed there a bit. But insoluble fiber doesn't break down at all. It basically just gets inside your stomach and goes out the other way. But it makes a lot easier, so eat your veggies. Story 26. Seeing as smelling uses the same senses to identify what something is, smelling and tasting are essentially the same thing, just with different particle size. You are tasting every bad fart you ever smell. Also, side note, the idea of 5 senses is ridiculous. It's more with obscure ones like gravity, heat being different senses. Story 27. You have to do what normal people do. If you don't, your body is going to run into problems. The whole anatomy is designed like this, around what is normal. Your blood runs in your veins and gets a little push by you moving around in the day. Sit down in a chair doing nothing for 8 hours and your blood will clot inside your veins. That's because over millions of years of evolution has taken into account the average activity of a human body. Don't bathe too much and your skin gets infections. Bathe too much and your skin will get infections as well. Story 28. The human breasts are modified sweat glands. Men have nipples because, for the first few months of development, all babies are female. The fetus doesn't start to differentiate into male or female until later. By then, the nipples have already formed. A male's breast tissue can usually lactate as well. It generally requires hormone injections, but all the necessary plumbing is in place. In some cases, males can lactate, give milk, without hormone injections, although this usually requires close contact with a lactating female. Story 29. Your eye pupil is not just a black point, but a hole. Yes, it's a hole, and there is a fluid called vitreous humor, which maintains the shape of the eye and ensures that the light entering inside is not refracted. That's how ophthalmologists, eye doctors, doing surgery on your eye to fix it is cutting your cornea and using your eye pupil to enter your eye. Story 30. For the first few months of a baby's life, they see everything upside down. This is because your eyes capture a mirror image anyway, but then your brain corrects it to be the right way up. However, an early baby's brain hasn't learned to do this, and so they see everything upside down. Story 31. Dehydration causes ADH, aka AVP, which is made in the same place, posterior pituitary, and structurally similar to oxytocin. When you're pregnant and dehydrated, this is theoretically partially responsible for cramping feeling due to activation of oxytocin receptors on the uterus that controls contractions. Story 32. You could perfectly well lose weight without diet or exercise. We know enough about human biochemistry that signaling the body to start burning fat is quite doable. The reason this is not a widespread method is that aside killing your liver and kidneys and possibly exposing you to a variety of environmental toxins, you would boil alive. The energy has to go somewhere, and it will be heat. In theory, by hooking a person to a dialysis machine and cooling down both externally and internally, there are various ways, few of them pleasant, it could be done, but it's too much a risk and effort for a common man. Super rich though, perfectly possible. Story 33. Different language functions are controlled by different regions of the brain. For example, one's expressive language, melodic function/intonation, semantic knowledge, etc. are all controlled by different regions of the brain. Commonly, individuals that have a left hemisphere stroke suffer from difficulty with expressive language. However, if they have an intact connection to the right hemisphere, they can take advantage of the right hemisphere's melodic acumen and retain how to speak by singing. It's called melodic intonation therapy, or MIT. Story 34. The heart is no longer on the left side of the chest. The floating ribs are now in the back of the rib cage. The intestines are no longer laid neatly. They're now just a jumbled mess. The kidneys are now protected by the rib cage. The eye sockets are no longer hollow. They have a bone and have a slit for the optic nerve. The liver is much larger, and we have 6 Dremel-style holes in our skull for nerves called foramen Mandela effect. Story 35. The ulnar nerve is the largest unprotected nerve in your entire body. It starts around your spine and your neck and goes through the elbow. It is the reason for the funny bone. What is not funny about this nerve is that it is often used in torture techniques. On a lesser note, if you get hit there with a small enough object hard enough, you'll lose consciousness almost immediately. Story 36. I think I saw this in a Vsauce video. A newborn isn't afraid of monsters and such. They only develop that fear later on when around 1 or 2, if I remember correctly. They showed pictures of distorted faces and monsters to very young babies and they didn't react, but when they showed it to a baby that's a little older, it was afraid. Story 37. Humans have 46 chromosomes, peas have 14, and crayfish have 200. There is enough nicotine in 4 or 5 cigarettes to kill an average adult if ingested whole. The tooth is the only part of the human body that can't repair itself. Your nose can remember 50,000 different scents, and women are better smellers than men. Story 38. You can be born with a little extra nerve connection going through your heart, and certain abdominal externation will cause a signal to go through it and make your heart beat very fast, like 200 plus beats per minute easily. It's called WPW. It's treated by sending a little wire up each of the major arteries in your inner thighs and cauterizing it so that signals can't travel through it. I know because I had it and went through the treatment. It's a very rare condition and the procedure is super easy nowadays. Story 39. That drinking too much water can kill you. In a nutshell, drinking too much water too fast can cause an electrolyte imbalance, which can lead to acute hyponatremia, which causes your cells to expand and your brain to swell and literally crush itself against the inside of your skull. Sounds pretty metal if you ask me. P.S. I'm not a toxologist. I just like to watch Chubby Emu. Go see a doctor if you're sick. Story 40. While in labor, a woman's body releases a hormone that makes your memory of it hazy. Like it didn't really happen to you. It encourages you to do that crazy bullshit again. This is true. My wife's recollection of our daughter's birth is completely different to the traumatic storm, literally and figuratively, that actually went down. Next week, somebody asked her how long her labor was. She said it was about 4.5 hours. It was actually closer to 12. Story 41. We have ridiculous endurance compared to most land animals. We're slower, but due to supercooling, we sweat all over, and adaptations to making running efficient, when fit, we can dog trot almost any other animal to his death from heat stroke and or exhaustion. From the point of view of our prey animals, we're the Terminator, or maybe Yurok High. We seem to never tire, and we just keep coming. Story 42. In the human body, bacteria cells outnumber human cells by a factor between 3 to 10, depending on the body size, etc. 1. There are an estimated 100 trillion bacterial cells in the human body, yet they only make up like 1 to 3% of the body weight. 2. In men, sperm are created continuously for as long as we live. In women, all egg cells are present at birth, about 1 to 2 million. In fact, the body probably stops making these at around 20 weeks. Each of our eyes has a blind spot right in the center of the eye. Here's a test to find yours. While we're on the eye, we technically see the world upside down. I'll let Bill Nye explain it. Story 43. Babies don't have patellas, kneecaps. They don't develop until a baby starts walking. Also, they are considered sesamoid bones and are therefore not counted in the 206 bone skeleton. Edit. JK. Apparently patellas are a part of the counted skeleton. The rest is still true.